Okay, today we're gonna make a really just simple granola, which takes advantage. It uses rolled oats that are coming from the winter farmers market. They're available year round, but something wonderful to have. And hazelnuts, so a wonderful Oregon farm product at the farmers market. Again, available year round from certain farmers, but it's got its peak season of harvest in fall, and we see them, vendors bring them to the market, farmers have them through the winter season for sure. Multiple farmers have them. So I am going to preheat my oven to 250, because with the name of the game with granola is just a really low and slow bake. So 250. We'll get the oven preheated, and then I can prepare my ingredients. I've got a big mixing bowl, and for this recipe, it's a smaller batch of granola, really to serve like 1 or 2 people, but it's a great recipe to scale up. It's something that will keep in the cupboard if you put it in a glass jar with a lid, or something that will be airtight. You can keep it for a while. But for this recipe, I've got 2 cups of rolled oats. I've got my cup of hazelnuts. I haven't chopped these yet, so I'll probably need some more. I've got a cup of hazelnuts. And this is really another one of those, use whatever you've got or whatever you like. If you've got other nuts, or some of these ingredients are listed as optional that you'd like to include or exclude in your granola, go for it. Something else to think about is how finely you want to chop your nuts. I like having some bigger pieces and bigger bites in there. But I'm going through these hazelnuts with a pretty sharp knife and getting them all cut like at least twice. So there will be some smaller shaved pieces and some bigger, heartier bites. Add those to my bowl. Chop them finer if you like. It's something you could experiment with. Also, walnuts are a great addition. You could take the proportions and use a mixture of different kinds of nuts. Cashews are really wonderful in granola. That's one of my favorites. But hazelnuts and walnuts would be our locally grown nuts you can find in the farmer's market. I am next I'm going to put in some shredded coconut. This is something I use and sometimes something I don't. I've got a sweetened coconut. I'm going to add that into the mixture. That was approximately a quarter of a cup, but again, really you can use whatever you'd like to do to get the proportions that you enjoy. And then I've got 3 tablespoons of dark brown sugar. So I'm going to sprinkle on top of that. And maple syrup also makes a wonderful sweetener, or you can use honey. You could take these proportions, everything is pretty flexible, and use that 3 tablespoon amount for whatever sweetener you'd like to use. It will work out. Don't stress too much about exact proportions. I've got coconut oil here is what I like to use. It complements the flavors of the nuts and the fact that I'm using shredded coconut, and I like the flavor of it. So I melted it. It was 3 tablespoons of coconut oil. I melted it in the microwave, and I'm actually going to give my dry ingredients a little mix before I toss in the oil. I'm also going to add the salt. This recipe calls for a quarter of a teaspoon of salt. So not too much. Again, I eyeballed that. I'll toss these ingredients and then carefully spreading it out and slowly pour the coconut oil. So get all of it out of your bowl, out of your small little bowl. I melted the coconut oil. And I'll just get that nice and coated on all the oats and ingredients. In here. Another option for this recipe is to use some dried fruit like raisins or dried cranberries, craisins. That will be something that we'll add after it's done baking. I have a little chunk from my brown sugar that I'm gonna pull out. Do I have another one? Another little chunk of brown sugar that I'm just gonna pull out so I don't have that bite. Too sweet. You can also adjust and add more sweetener to this recipe. I don't like my granola terribly sweet, so I'm kind of, I wouldn't call it under sweetening, but there's not that much sweetener in here. And that's a nice thing you get to do when you're cooking at home, like you get to control those elements if you want it sweeter or saltier or less sweet than what you'd probably find in a packaged grocery store granola. And I've got my cookie sheet, like a nice big sheet pan compared to what I've prepared for my granola because I want a really nice thin layer for it to toast in the oven. I'm gonna give it a coat of coconut oil just straight onto the pan. And I am going to do that with my hand because the coconut oil is thick and spoonable, but it is gonna melt with my body temperature. I also do this when I butter pans, when I make pie or bake bread or anything. I just use my fingers. My hands are clean. I washed them before I started. I'll have to wash them again after. But spread a layer coconut oil onto our sheet pan. Try to leave the extra on the pan. Why not? Take it off of my hand. Oh, some of the sugar and the oil got stuck to the spatula on my spoon. I can also even see the salt, which is an important ingredient that we want to be combined. So I'm going to knock that off with a spoon. Make sure it actually makes it into the oven. I'm always tempted to just start eating it now, but I know that it'll be even better after it's cooked in the oven. I spread it out on the pan, and I'm going to give it a shake to really just evenly coat it. You can use a spatula to move it around if you need to. I think shaking it makes it more even. I'll come and show you. This is my beautiful sheet pan that's getting ready to go in the oven as soon as it's preheated to 250. It's not quite there yet, but I'll pop it in because I know it's getting close. And with this recipe, about every 15 minutes for an hour and 15 minutes, I'm just going to take the pan out and give it a stir so that it's browning most evenly. But here it goes, it's preheated, great timing. Into the oven. We've had our first 15 minutes in the oven. I can smell the flavors of the granola, the aroma, and I'm going to give it its first stir. So I'm going to just use my spatula to toss the ingredients, and we're doing this just so it gets a nice even brown as it's toasting in the oven. And then I shake it to flatten it back out again. And put it back in there. And I'll come back every 15 minutes just until it's got a nice brown coating and is finished toasting. All right, it's been 30 minutes now that our granola has been in the oven. So we're giving it a second stir. And I wanted to show you how it's been progressing. So it's getting darker brown. I'm gonna stir it and then shake the tray to flatten it back out so it's getting evenly toasted. I'm back in the oven for 15-minute increments. We're going for about an hour and 15 minutes total. Yes, it has been an hour and 25 minutes that our granola has been in the oven at 250, and it is ready. It has gotten nice and toasty. You could always make it more brown and toasted if you preferred, but it's still hot, but that's a really beautiful, crispy. Look at those shreds of coconut got nice and toasty, and so have the oats. We're ready to eat after it cools down. All right, our granola has cooled. I'm gonna put it back in our mixing bowl. At this point, you could toss in any dried fruit. The recipe has the option of raisins or craisins. I've got some dried cranberries here that'll fold in evenly. We talked about storage. This could go in a mason jar, you know, with a screw top lid or any airtight container. It'll last on the counter. I'm really excited to have a bite.